Well, so many things, meeting astronauts, including, of course, Jim Lovell, Dave Scott, who was our technical advisor. But I think the big thrill, the thing that all of us...
Hollywood's golden age has long been celebrated as a time of glitz, glamour, and larger-than-life stars. An era when the silver screen promised adventure, romance, and heroism to audiences around the world. Yet, beneath the dazzling lights and velvet curtains, Ron Howard starkly frames this period as one of silence, cruelty, and exploitation. The Star has revealed the 6 most evil actors of Hollywood's golden age. The allure of fame not only enabled destructive behavior, but also normalized it. Celebrity culture obscured moral judgment, while perpetuating cycles of abuse behind the screen's seductive glow. Errol Flynn, the predator behind the swashbuckler. The golden-haired swashbuckler, whose name became synonymous with cinematic adventure, projected an image of effortless charm, dashing heroism, and untamed vitality that defined Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s. Born in Hobart, Tasmania, in 1909, Errol Flynn first captivated audiences with films like Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood. On screen, he was fearless, gallant, and irrepressibly charismatic. To fans and the media, he was the epitome of heroism and vitality, an icon whose very presence seemed to promise adventure and excitement. This dazzling exterior, however, concealed a life of recklessness, moral transgression, and self-destructive impulses. In 1942, he faced allegations of assault and inappropriate behavior involving 2 underage girls in Beverly Hills. The charges shocked the public and threatened to shatter the image of the untouchable swashbuckler. Flynn's trial, extensively covered by newspapers such as the Los Angeles Times and chronicled in his biographies by Charles Hyam and Thomas McNulty, culminated in acquittal, but the case exposed troubling intersections of power, privilege, and manipulation within Hollywood. Reports suggest that Warner Brothers exerted influence behind the scenes, allegedly coaching witnesses and shaping narratives to safeguard their lucrative star. Flynn's acquittal did little to erase the shadow of the allegations, and while studios celebrated the preservation of their star's image, the public was left to grapple with the tension between admiration for his cinematic exploits and unease over his private conduct. Beyond legal troubles, Flynn's personal life was marked by compulsions that ultimately eroded both his health and fortune. Known for his prodigious drinking and gambling, Flynn accumulated debts and frequently found himself in financial distress, despite commanding some of Hollywood's highest salaries. His intimate relationships, often with younger women and in increasingly chaotic circumstances, mirrored the impulsive bravado of his on-screen persona, but lacked the restraint that made his fictional characters heroic. Addiction, both to alcohol and to the thrill of risk, compounded over time, contributing to a decline in professional reliability and public reputation. By the early 1950s, Flynn's career had entered a slow descent, with fewer leading roles and less commercial success, reflecting the consequences of private excess spilling into professional life. His death at age 50 in 1959 from a heart attack exacerbated by years of substance abuse punctuated a life defined by extremes. But his example is far from the only one. Kirk Douglas, honor on-screen, terror off-screen. Born as Ishur Danilowicz in Amsterdam, New York, in 1916, Kirk Douglas became one of Hollywood's most enduring icons of moral clarity and heroic resolve. From his breakthrough performance in Champion to the swashbuckling grandeur of the Vikings and the existential tension of Paths of Glory, Douglas cultivated a cinematic persona defined by integrity, courage, and indomitable will. Douglas's screen image became a template for the heroic male figure in post-war American cinema, celebrated for resilience, principled action, and an almost palpable sense of honor. Yet, beneath the polished sheen of stardom lay a man whose off-screen life frequently belied the ethical rectitude of his on-screen roles. Accounts of his volatility are well documented in biographies such as Kirk Douglas, The Last Hollywood Legend, by Robert Mattson, and autobiographical reflections in The Ragman's Son. His temper extended to both professional and personal settings. Crew members, actors, and even studio executives described moments when Douglas would explode in anger over perceived slights or artistic disagreements, wielding his celebrity as a tool of intimidation. More troubling are allegations surrounding his potential involvement in the infamous 1957 incident with Natalie Wood, who, according to later accounts from friends and industry insiders, claimed she was assaulted during an encounter involving Douglas. Though concrete legal action never emerged, the rumors highlight a pattern in which Douglas's fame and influence shielded him from accountability. Investigative reporting and later retrospectives, such as those compiled in Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth Anger, illustrate how studios often excused or concealed such misconduct, prioritizing financial gain and star power over ethical considerations. During the 1940s and 1950s, actors were contractually bound to studios that controlled their publicity, professional trajectory, and public persona. A star's image was carefully curated, often at odds with reality, to sustain audience loyalty and revenue streams. In Douglas's instance, the studios tolerated and sometimes enabled his volatile behavior because his on-screen reputation for bravery, honor, and moral fortitude directly translated into ticket sales. Crew members, subordinate actors, and staff frequently bore the consequences of his outbursts. Douglas's career flourished despite documented intimidation and misconduct, revealing a moral economy in which fear, talent, and visibility intermingled to preserve the mythos of the star at the expense of accountability. On screen, he was the soldier who refused to compromise ethical principles in paths of glory, the pioneering boxer and champion who battled against personal demons yet maintained a sense of fairness, and the Viking leader who navigated treachery with courage and dignity. Off-screen, however, those same traits could manifest destructively, leaving a trail of intimidation, fear, and occasionally alleged abuse. His career trajectory, spanning decades of acclaimed performances, awards, and cultural recognition, coexisted with behaviors that would be condemned in ordinary social contexts. Douglas remains celebrated as a pioneering actor whose portrayals shaped mid-20th century American ideals of courage and honor, yet his off-screen conduct complicates the moral clarity of that legacy. Faye Dunaway, Cruelty Wrapped in Beauty. Born in Bascom, Florida in 1941, Faye Dunaway rose to fame in the 1960s and 1970s as one of Hollywood's most glamorous and magnetic actresses. With Academy Award-winning performances such as Network and unforgettable roles in Bonnie and Clyde, Dunaway was celebrated for her intensity, sophistication, and commanding presence. On screen, she exuded elegance and ruthlessness in equal measure, portraying women who could dominate a scene with a glance, a word, or a smoldering silence. Yet behind the camera, Dunaway developed a reputation that starkly contrasted with her celebrated poise. Colleagues, assistants, and crew members frequently described her as difficult, demanding, and often humiliating, creating an environment of tension and fear that mirrored some of the most infamous characters she embodied. These accounts, documented in retrospectives such as Faye Dunaway, the biography by Charles Hyam, and interviews in the Los Angeles Times, depict a star whose charisma on screen was accompanied by a mercurial temperament off it, revealing the darker side of a Hollywood system that often tolerated and even enabled the excesses of its most bankable talents. The most striking illustration of Dunaway's off-screen cruelty can be observed during the production of Mommy Dearest, a film in which she portrayed the legendary actress Joan Crawford. Infamous for her abusive treatment of children, Dunaway's commitment to the role went beyond method acting into a territory of replication that unsettled the cast and crew. Reports from production insiders suggest that she would belittle assistants, issue harsh reprimands over trivial matters, and create an atmosphere of intimidation, behaviors that eerily mirrored Crawford's notorious volatility. One crew member recounted to Vanity Fair that Dunaway's tendency to mirror Crawford's abusive patterns extended even to the smallest interactions, from raising her voice to orchestrating public shaming of staff, effectively enacting the very cruelty she was portraying on screen. During the height of her fame in the 1960s and 1970s, her box office draw and Academy recognition insulated her from the professional consequences of her temperament. Directors, producers, and co-stars often acquiesced to her demands, prioritizing her star power over concerns about workplace hostility. However, by the early 1980s, as films such as Barfly and The Marrying Man illustrate, Dunaway's reputation for cruelty began to limit her opportunities. Industry insiders noted that persistent off-screen antagonism eventually outweighed her celebrity. creating a rare instance in Hollywood where a star's interpersonal behavior curtailed their professional desirability. Her tendency to replicate the behaviors of the women she portrayed, particularly figures known for control, manipulation, or intimidation, highlights a recurring phenomenon in method acting and character immersion. Dunaway's approach suggests that the psychological boundaries between self and role can become porous, allowing the emotional and behavioral patterns of a character to surface in everyday interactions. This goes to show how immersive acting practices, combined with status and power, can create environments in which assistants, co-stars, and crew members are subjected to prolonged emotional stress. In examining her story, one confronts not only the artistry that made Dunaway a legend, but also the shadows that linger when the boundaries between performance and reality dissolve. But wait, there's more! John Wayne, bully as national symbol. Born as Marion Robert Morrison in Winterset, Iowa, in 1907, John Wayne became an enduring icon of American cinema, a towering figure whose rugged, square-jawed persona embodied the ideals of patriotism, courage, and stoic heroism. From his breakout in Stagecoach to war epics like Sands of Iwo Jima and westerns such as The Searchers, Wayne cultivated an image of the archetypal American man, fearless, principled, and unyielding in the face of adversity. Audiences embraced him as a symbol of national identity during periods of domestic uncertainty and global conflict, viewing his on-screen characters as exemplars of virtue, moral clarity, and leadership. Studios like Republic and Warner Brothers leveraged Wayne's persona to craft narratives that intertwined his rugged masculinity with notions of American exceptionalism, patriotism, and frontier justice. The public often conflated Wayne's screen presence with personal character. Yet beneath this carefully cultivated mythology lay a man whose private behavior frequently contradicted the ideals he portrayed. Off-screen, John Wayne was widely reported to have been intimidating, controlling, and overtly prejudiced. According to Scott Iman in John Wayne, The Life and Legend, and Ronald L. Davis's The Truth About John Wayne, Wayne exhibited behaviors ranging from overt misogyny to racial bigotry. He was known to assert dominance over colleagues, often berating assistants, directors, and co-stars who challenged him or failed to conform to his expectations. These displays of intimidation mirrored the aggression of many of his cinematic personas. More troubling were Wayne's documented prejudices toward Native Americans and black actors. In interviews and private correspondence, he expressed views that aligned with white supremacist narratives of the American West, dismissing indigenous peoples as obstacles to progress and marginalizing black actors in Hollywood productions. Films like The Conqueror, in which Wayne portrayed Genghis Khan, and The Searchers, while lauded for their cinematic power, reflect a broader cultural landscape in which Wayne's personal ideologies shaped not only the roles he chose, but also the stories Hollywood amplified. Wayne's embodiment of nationalistic ideals functioned as a form of cultural camouflage, allowing his offensive and oppressive behaviors to be largely unexamined during his lifetime. His characters projected authority, integrity, and justice. Unlike many actors whose reputations suffered due to misconduct, Wayne's off-screen transgressions were mitigated by the cultural capital of his screen personas. His popularity, bolstered by decades of box office success, allowed him to wield power over productions, roles, and narratives, effectively shaping Hollywood's representation of race, gender, and national identity. Directors, producers, and studios often accommodated his behavior, recognizing that his star power translated directly into financial gain. In doing so, they tacitly reinforced hierarchies of authority and privilege, creating an environment in which intimidation, sexism, and racism could flourish behind the glamour of Hollywood's public facade. Wayne's legacy, therefore, is inseparable from the systems that enabled it. The juxtaposition between the public myth of Wayne the American hero and the documented evidence of intimidation, prejudice, and moral disregard highlights the moral ambiguity of celebrity culture, particularly in mid-20th century Hollywood. Historians, critics, and audiences must confront the fact that admiration for on-screen heroism can obscure ethical evaluation, and that the construction of national symbols is often inseparable from the contradictions, biases, and abuses of the individuals who embody them. Roman Polanski, brilliance entwined with criminality. Born in Paris in 1933, and a survivor of the Holocaust, Roman Polanski emerged as one of the most influential filmmakers of the 20th century, blending stylistic innovation with a deep psychological intensity that redefined cinema. His early works in Poland, including Knife in the Water, earned international acclaim, establishing him as a master of tension and human complexity. After moving to Hollywood, Polanski directed a series of landmark films, including Rosemary's Baby and Chinatown, that showcased his ability to fuse meticulous visual composition with narratives steeped in paranoia, suspense, and moral ambiguity. Yet, alongside this extraordinary artistry lies a scandal that has indelibly marked his life and legacy. In 1977, Polanski was arrested in Los Angeles on charges of assaulting Samantha Geimer, a minor. He initially entered a plea bargain, but fled the United States before sentencing, avoiding prison and beginning decades of legal limbo. This evasion set the stage for a career and reputation defined by both cinematic brilliance and unresolved criminality. Despite his criminal conviction in absentia, Polanski continued to receive recognition from the film industry, a reality that has sparked persistent ethical outrage. His 2003 Academy Award for Best Director for The Pianist reignited debates about the Hollywood establishment's willingness to separate or even excuse personal misconduct when weighed against creative achievement. Publications such as The Guardian and The New York Times documented both the acclaim and the backlash. Some celebrated the artistic merit of his work, while others condemned the decision as a tacit endorsement of criminality. The controversy revealed that Polanski's status as an auteur allowed him to occupy a unique space in which talent could be valorized, while moral transgressions were, if not ignored, then minimized. His ability to traverse borders, continue filmmaking, and attend international film festivals despite the outstanding U.S. warrant exemplifies how celebrity privilege can insulate individuals from consequences that would be unavoidable for most people. Polanski's continued career and recognition highlight the selective application of justice within cultural institutions. While ordinary citizens face incarceration or sustained public condemnation for criminal acts, Polanski maintained professional visibility and, in some circles, reverence. Directors, actors, and producers, including Woody Allen and Martin Scorsese, have, at various times, defended his genius, framing his contributions to cinema as separate from his personal conduct. This defense, while perhaps well-intentioned by those emphasizing artistic autonomy, raises profound ethical questions. It demonstrates how institutions, in this case Hollywood and the global film community, can prioritize creative output over accountability, creating a hierarchy in which prestige, influence, and celebrity shield individuals from scrutiny. Polanski resides primarily in France, a country that does not extradite its citizens to the U.S. His films often explore power dynamics, corruption, and psychological trauma. Ironic, right? Critics and scholars, including Paul Monaco in the 60s, 1960 to 1969, have argued that Polanski's work cannot be separated entirely from the context of his personal life, as the artistic lens itself is shaped by the creator's experiences, ethics, and worldview. Hollywood's embrace of Polanski, punctuated by his 2003 Oscar and ongoing international acclaim, illuminates a systemic willingness to prioritize artistry over ethical accountability, reflecting a troubling cultural calculus in which talent can eclipse legality and morality. But wait, there's more from where that came. Mickey Rooney, charm as a mask for selfishness. Born as Joseph Ewell Jr. in Brooklyn, New York in 1920, Mickey Rooney rose to stardom as a child actor in the Andy Hardy series during the 1930s and 1940s. Rooney embodied an on-screen persona of affable cheerfulness, resilience, and earnest optimism that endeared him to generations of audiences. He could make viewers laugh, cry, and root for him in equal measure, cultivating an image of relentless good humor and warmth that became his trademark. Studios, including MGM, leveraged this persona, marketing him as the quintessential American boy next door, a figure whose natural charisma and affability seemed to transcend the ordinary bounds of talent. Yet, beneath this public veneer lay a man whose personal life was riddled with turmoil, recklessness, and behavior that sharply contrasted the lovable image he projected. Biographers such as Andy Dugan in Mickey Rooney The Films and Career of an American Legend and Life is Too Short. The biography of Mickey Rooney by Glenn Mitchell document a pattern of financial imprudence, mistreatment of those closest to him, and arrogance, revealing a stark dissonance between the man and the myth. Despite earning millions during the peak of his career, he repeatedly found himself in dire economic straits due to extravagant spending, ill-advised investments, and court-mandated support obligations from multiple marriages. Over his lifetime, Rooney was married 8 times, fathering 9 children, many of whom later reported experiencing humiliation, neglect, or exploitation as a result of his compulsive behaviors. Court records, estate documents, and interviews published in the Los Angeles Times in the 1980s and 1990s paint a portrait of a man who, even in later years, was frequently embroiled in lawsuits and financial disputes, often involving family members. Co-stars and assistants recounted instances in which Rooney would belittle others, assert dominance on set, or publicly humiliate colleagues and family members alike. He demanded absolute deference in his private and professional interactions, reinforcing hierarchical power dynamics that made him both admired and feared. In the memoir Life is Too Short, Glenn Mitchell details episodes in which Rooney would exploit his charm to manipulate situations in his favor, whether for professional gain, financial advantage, or personal gratification. The dichotomy between Rooney's public charm and private self-interest offers broader insight into the construction of Hollywood mythologies. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.